The biggest thing I just picked up on from here, and for people listening who I constantly hear, like, you can only make good money in high tech, I think that you just kind of said that's not the case. You could make good money as a physical therapist. You just have to be willing to put in the hours. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Second Chapter Careers. This is going to be a little bit of a different episode because for two reasons. First of all, here I have Aharon Blatman. As you can tell, he's the first man I've had on the show in quite a few months. Last season we focused entirely on women, and now it's time to bring everyone else back into the loop. But also, Aharon will be sharing a story not specifically of how he changed his entire career, but how he's in the process of side hustling his way into his second chapter. And I think that there will be a lot of lessons for everyone to learn how to merge two of your passions, how to do two things that you love at the same time until you feel comfortable and confident to change over entirely. And that is something that is often not discussed. People often want to think, when you're changing, you just make it all of a sudden, and that's not really how it works. There's a lot of building involved. So I'm really excited to explore both Aharon's careers and his strategies for building out the next chapter. So without further ado, Aharon, welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you so much for having me, and the pleasure is all mine to be your first male guest in a while. And yeah, so my name is Aharon Blatman. I live currently in Ariel. I have 5 children. I'm married to Talia, who's in content, and I have been spending the past few years, basically, like you said, kind of like building a new career for myself alongside my previous one. So I've been for the past decade working as a physical therapist in various practices, a kupat cholim, a hospital, even had the honor of starting a new rehab facility in Beilinson straight after the war started, had some miluim, and so it was really a privilege to help really contribute to the war efforts and help with other aspects other than just being in miluim and doing what I do best. And so that also kind of led me to a world of wanting to help and contribute a little bit more and in other aspects, not just as a physical therapist. And I started pursuing this passion towards finances and helping people with their finances. In Israel, it's called Yoetz Kalkalat Mishpacha, or a family financial planner or advisor. And yeah, so I started pursuing that goal, my passion of, first of all, just improving our family's finances in all aspects, whether it came to our pensions, our savings, starting to invest, thinking about really expanding also our family's, worth and planning towards the future. How do we start, thinking about how to provide for our children? How do we want to set our kids up? After we were just working at it so hard for ourselves, I felt that it was also time to start helping others. And so the past few years, within the world of healthcare, I kind of became the go-to person with helping people understand about the options that they have when they work, where they work, how to maximize their income, what are they missing out on. And it really just became like a passion, like a side. It wasn't a job, it was a hobby. But every place I went to, it was like, okay, you're new, speak to Aharon Blatman. He's a person to go over your paycheck and to see what you're missing out on. Because many people who work in healthcare or in different government related jobs, they can find that their paycheck isn't always so consistent. They don't know what they expect at the end of the month or at the beginning of the next month. What are their benefits and what are they missing out on? And I kind of became very good at it. And it became like a natural, like a passion. So I would be talking to at staff meetings and just at different settings, trying to help people understand where they're at and kind of bring clarity. And so when I started pursuing it more professional way, then I found that I'm good at it. But not only that, because my wife is works with mainly Anglos, I started finding myself working with many Anglos, and it wasn't just finances, but it's like challenges, personal challenges that have to do with their like place of work, understanding their paycheck, understanding their benefits, just also the challenges of like what are the different financial options that they have available for them to do. Then like that was something that was uh, mind changing. So when I started working with Anglos, I was discovering like this whole world of challenges that opened up to me. I married an Ola Chadasha. I grew up in an Anglo household, but like finances wasn't something that we just talked about. My parents made Aliyah before I was born. We relocated to the States when I was in high school. So I grew up in a whole Anglo setting and, all different terminologies and that culture. But I didn't really know the challenges that people faced when they get a bill and they have no idea what to do with it. It could be just kvishesh, and it's like, what is this thing? Just simply explain to someone that's a toll road. To me it's obvious, but to people who don't speak the language, just don't understand how things work, it was a completely different challenge. So kind of started opening up to it, and more, even things that just I take for granted. Just as an example, each parent has the opportunity to invest for the kid's future in a Chisachon Kol Yeled, which is a program from Bituach Lomi, and it gives you an option of investing in a bank or in a managed like brokerage account. The difference is obviously between getting very little gains to getting possibly substantial gains. But as an American, that can be very problematic. But for someone who doesn't speak that language, for someone who doesn't live that challenge, I had no idea. And so the more I kind of got to work with Anglos, the more I got to experience their day-to-day challenges, I understood that I have a lot to give. I can help them out on the various different aspects, even sometimes like helping people pay bills or deal with hotzat poal, which is the bailiff. I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but these are situations that many people can encounter, all the more so if you just are new to Israel and Israeli like society and everything that has to do with Israeli finances.
Wow. That is a lot to unpack. So let's start at the beginning and then we'll move into the present. I have not had anyone on the show yet that works in physical therapy, although I have worked with clients in that field. So could you please tell anyone listening who might be interested in studying physical therapy, first of all, why did you choose it? What was it that drew you to that field? And second of all, what is the studying like?
Okay, so first of all, always loved working with people and helping people out. And the idea of physio kind of like grew on me throughout my, let's say, late teens and when I was in the army. And after the army, I'd encountered various like bodily pains, and I had been through various, let's say, treatments, and actually like was a chronic pain sufferer for many years. And so I went into this world of wanting to help people, and some of the providers that actually helped me, I didn't feel like they did the best job, didn't do the best job explaining things, didn't do the best job kind of like just containing me, like to really like give me that place. And it gave me this feeling like I want to do better and do more. And so I kind of needed a strong wife to push me after we got married to get accepted to physiotherapy. It is quite demanding because the programs are very small and they don't have a lot of room for error. It isn't just like engineering that they can afford to just allow a lot of people to drop out, because every person who comes to physio school in the end has to also get clinical training. They assume that if you're starting, you're finishing. So I had to improve my grades. I had to also pass like it's called a psychotechny, like one of those psychological evaluations. And some schools, they actually also want you to do an interview. The studies are quite intense. It's 4 years. Towards the end of the 4 years, you have to do very long clinical training, which isn't paid. And not only that, it's considered a course. So you actually pay to work for free for just over
Sounds
six
about
months.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, 6 months of full-time work. And you
Wow.
see patients, you have a full caseload and different settings like rehab and a ambulatory clinic, what we'd call the kupat cholim, and a hospital. And so you really get like hands-on experience and like just working with people. And it was my passion to work with people. And so when I got married and we even had one kid, I started school. So I started school with one daughter, finished with three, and
Same,
I really
actually.
so really respect that. It was quite a challenge, but we needed as a family to really get ready for it, to mentally prepare to be able to study 5 or 6 days a week. At the end of the day, to be with the kids, and only then sit down to study like late at night. And there's a lot of hands-on work, meaning this isn't a degree. I didn't do the degree during Corona, so I know that today it's a bit different, but still, there's a lot of hands-on work. You're not going to have like orthopedic treatment via Zoom. You're going to have to be present in that class. So it's one of those degrees that's like very intense, but with the same people. So you make like good friends and good relationships because you've seen everyone in like their underwear for a few years. But you just really make good relationships and friendships. Like people got married, like just classmates. And so we kind of worked together. We kind of worked together. And so it was a very special experience. I think for anyone who wants and wishes to work as a physical therapist, welcome to reach out. I think it's an
Well, thank
extremely
you.
rewarding profession. You get to work with people. I don't know how fast AI is going to replace us.
Exactly. I tell that to people a lot. There are certain fields that just always need that human touch. I just gave a webinar about it yesterday. Are you
Exactly,
comfortable sharing what the salary range is for a physical therapist in Israel?
for sure. So it really depends where you work, like what setting. Is it a hospital? Is it the Kupat Cholim? Is it going to be Misrad Chinuch? That will really depend. It will really kind of like determine what your starting salary is going to be like and how it's going to kind of progress over the years. And even the different providers, meaning you can work at a hospital and it will be a huge difference between working at a public hospital versus working at a hospital that belongs to like a Kupat Cholim. For instance, Klalit run a few hospitals in the country and the salary will be much higher. And so, as a starting out physical therapist, I'll kind of like just backtrack a bit. In recent years, the Misrad Abriut has really tried to expand the workforce. So not only have they added on more positions in the hospitals and in the kupot, but they've also added more incentives, meaning you work well, you get paid better. It used to be, sadly, historically speaking, a lot of all the extra sessions you would do weren't even considered something to pay towards your pension. So you can have a decent paycheck, and almost half of it won't be something that will have hafrashot to your pension or keren ishtalmut, and it's substantial because people can feel like they're making a lot of money, but then come retirement age, they discover that their pension doesn't cover half of what they were making. So things have really, really progressed. And so let's say start from the top. And so Clalit and Maccabi are more or less the highest payers, where Clalit is a bit higher. And I would say if you're willing to work extra, so that's also a bit of a challenge because you get incentivized to see more patients. Obviously, there's a limit. You can't see 100 patients an hour. But if you hit the max amount of patients per hour, like obviously it's like units. So if you have enough units, then you can get extra pay. So for a salary of, let's say, 60%, so in Israel, 40 hours a week is 100%. So 60 will be 24, 70 will be around 30, and then you can have like a base salary of, let's say, 10,000 shekels for 100%. So let's say take 60%, so that'll be 6,000, and then they'll incentivize you with an extra, let's say, 3,500 shekels, and that's on the same amount of hours. That's in the Klalit. Maccabi isn't so far behind. And if you're going to work, say, 80, then you're going to get almost an added bonus of like, then those incentives can get close to 6,000 shekels, another nine for how many hours a week? We're talking about, let's say, 35, 36 hours a week. And even Misrad Abriut added these recent bonuses that if you take higher percentages of like the misra, right, then they're going to give you like an added yearly bonus. It can go starting at 12,000, so it would add about another 1,500 shekels if you would average out a month. So for working, let's say 4 full days or 4.5 days, you can get starting out like almost as a new physio. Within a year, you can get probably about 15, maybe even less, yeah, but maybe about 15,000 shekels a month. Brutto, obviously before, taxes and pension and all that. And then some of the kupot or hospitals give you options of doing, let's say, house calls or added things after work. So I actually think it's a huge advantage for people who work in these settings, and I'll explain in a second. You have all these like added, let's say, options to make more money. So if you're more available, if it works out, if your wife is enabling or your husband, you can leave, let's say, with a place where I worked in the morning, you can run a studio, you can teach Pilates, and after work you could do some house calls, and that will add substantial amount of money to your salary. So let's say I can make, after about 5 years I was making, and obviously because prices kind of changed and salaries went up, but making about 25,000 shekels brutto for, I wouldn't say a 40-hour week, maybe let's say leaning towards 45 or maybe even sometimes 50 hours a week. But I had that option, meaning if I needed to work more, my place of work kind of facilitated it. We're used to, let's say, place of work where they have the added after hours, the global after hours,
Right.
right? You
Global
kind of like, it
after
just
hours.
gets paid, right? And you take it for granted. You're getting an extra 4,000 shekels. You can work on Friday, you can work on Motzi Shabbos or whatever it is. Here, it's like, okay, if you have the time, you can up your salary. You can even up your salary by like another 10,000 shekels a month if you
Wow.
had that extra, the extra time or that possibility. And if not, you just, when I do house calls, I would say to the guy giving me house calls, I say, kind of like lay off for a bit. I'm very busy. And then I would just, then my salary would be a bit lower. So on the one hand, it's a huge advantage for whoever has that option of, just kind of like playing kind of like a rope. You can kind of like just be very like flexible. But on the other hand, people get very upset because you're taking a vacation day and all those extra things aren't really counted towards it. So that's like a sore spot. Or the people can start, right through the door. And if you're really hustling, you can make a decent income. But then when you kind of get tired, then you're starting to work less, and all those extras aren't like available for you so much. So people from the get-go will choose places like working for Misrad Chinuch, where it's almost like the option. Where if working for a kupa or a hospital where you can really hustle, Misrad Chinuch, you'll start low, but you slowly build up a vetik, right? I mean, every day we're always talking about teachers and how their salary kind of like builds up over time. So you'll get those added benefits. You'll have the same vacations the teachers get. You'll get those same added, like those payments. You have the ishtalmuyot, very similar to teachers. And therapists will prefer it because they'll be like, okay, nobody's like sitting there like, okay, you got to see more and more clients or patients, and the kid is sick. Okay, so you have another coffee break. Here it isn't
Right.
like you need to hustle. Like, okay, I have less patients and I have this quota that you
Right.
don't have to meet it. But like if you don't meet your quota, you'll be sad if you don't get an extra 5,000 shekels at the end of the month.
You
So
know,
yeah,
it
so
is
those like
always
the
a
different options.
trade-off. Lifestyle matters. Your preferences
Exactly.
matter. But I think the biggest thing I just picked up on from here, and for people listening who I constantly hear, like, you can only make good money in high tech, I think that you just kind of said that's not the case. You could make good money as a physical therapist. You just have to be willing to put in the hours. But let me tell you, people who work in high
Hmm.
tech also put in the hours. They're not getting those buckets of money for free. So
For
that's
sure.
that's the commitment to the job, I guess you could say.
Hmm.
That was really really interesting. A lot of things I didn't know. What's your favorite part about being a physical therapist?
That's an excellent question, and I'll give it a second. I think first meeting people and like really having like deep and good interactions with people is something special, something that sometimes we take for granted. There's like that human interaction isn't just the touch when relevant, but just constantly just being there for someone, being able to comfort them, being able to help them, and really kind of like guide them along. I remember when I was working for Ecopat Cholim Maccabi for a few years, and when I finished working and I wanted to move on, I moved to work in a hospital. Then I had a lot of patients who came up to me and were saying just how much they appreciated me for the help or like what I helped them do and helped them achieve along the way and how I mattered to them. I mean, it was a bit of a sad point for me. I was kind of telling some of the patients, it's a shame he didn't say that earlier. But
Right.
and I took it to heart in the sense that like I'm saying as a side note that we always have to try. It's very hard to be like appreciative of the people around us. Like not just wait for the extreme situations, so God
Right.
forbid someone passes away or moves or something changes in our status. But like just know that like a good word or just um, a compliment and it's something that goes a long way. And also, as a physio, I learned something very special that we're all just so unique at how we work and how we live our lives. And now you're working with could be tens of different therapists, and they all have a different approach. How they address people, how they address situations, just their daily conduct. And it was something I only later learned to really appreciate or at least miss. Today I work in a much smaller setting, but you just learn so much just from like hearing things beyond the mechitza, in the other cubicle nearby. How people are addressing people's ailments and also learning that it doesn't have to be one size fits all. You can help someone in one way. I can help them in a different way. And just collaborate and be part of like a team that helps people really like thrive and go through very hard times. We really appreciated working in rehab where we met. It wasn't just the soldier, because specifically I opened after the war started, but it's like the family. It's the girlfriend. It's the
Right.
girlfriend's family. It's just like there's a whole world that's around this, like the patient, and being a part of it and being a meaningful part of it is something that really, I guess, something I appreciate in the field.
I love that. And just to hit on something you said, you talked about like the process and how long the process is. I myself have a family member who had a severe stroke, and I've witnessed both the miracles of physical therapy and the process firsthand. And I'm curious how you deal with the pain of such a slow process. In this day of instant gratification and AI can do anything and you can just plug something into Google and get the answers you need, physical therapy is pretty much the opposite of that. It could take months or years to see the progress, to feel the relief. How does that translate down? Do you ever feel frustrated or like giving up because of that? Or do they train you about that in school?
I hear you. So you're touching on a huge subject. I think we can even talk about it probably like all day. And it relates to many, many different aspects of our life, right? It can even just, think about how we raise our children. But it's definitely a big challenge. And I felt at different points in life as a therapist, I encountered those challenges in like, various intensities. At a point where I just started working, I was working with mainly chronic pain patients. And like threw myself at it all the time. Like I just finished school and every single podcast was like about chronic pain, patient stories. Everything I did was to try to make myself a better therapist at like treating people with chronic pain as myself as like a chronic pain sufferer in the past. So I first really appreciated the fact that like you just sometimes need time and you need different settings. I myself had suffered for like 7 years from pain, and eventually I kind of like woke up one day pain free, and
Wow.
that also helped me. That also helped me kind of relate to patients or to be able to try to tell people, and that all of a sudden came from like more experience, but having more confidence in myself to tell someone like, dude, chill. Like, you'll be okay. Or you look fantastic. Like, I know I understand where you're at. I understand the challenges. I understand the fact that you feel uh, you're just either debilitating pain or just like practically handicapped. But that, obviously there are like a lot of good stories where people, rehabilitate and either get pain free or just go back to what they were doing. And obviously, there are a lot of situations. You mentioned someone with a stroke. There are a lot of severe conditions which there's a new person at the end, and it's a
Yes,
process, and you kind of get to see
absolutely.
them. So when I worked at a hospital, you see people like the most acute phase, this phase, it's like just this craziness, like everything's just so intense, and working with people, working with the family, trying to help them prepare for the day after. I'm not the social worker, but it'll be like, okay, let's try to like describe what is it going to be like when you get home. I've been doing house calls for many years, and sometimes it involves sitting down, not with a patient, but with his spouse or his children, who are having a very hard time accepting the new situation that they're in, and kind of like being there just to answer questions, just to like, um, I mean, sometimes it could be also very hard conversations, like you need to start thinking about a care,
I'm
like
sure.
we're going in that direction, or getting the family doctor involved if there's a situation where they're having a hard time, or getting the social worker involved, like giving her a call and saying, hey, I need you to run point with me on this because they need that support. So there are times where, yes, I feel like I'm bashing my head against the wall, like we aren't making progress, and in which it'll be like, okay, let's try to think, can we do something different? Maybe I should refer you to a different therapist. Maybe a different approach. Maybe, a fresh start. Maybe just taking a bit of a break, and then come back. Not necessarily give a solution, but help this situation where we're kind of like not progressing. So I've learned to be more humble about my role as a therapist, meaning it's not only me. I'm here to try to facilitate a process, and I'll do my best, giving the most information as legally allowed to give, and whatever's within my scope of practice. And that, like, I felt that gave me more of a purpose. And even if I'm become a bit skeptical about certain patients, let's say, you know, making 100% recovery, or being able to do things they've been doing in different stages in life. Also, sometimes I encounter patients who are in very like serious health conditions. Somebody who's like a final stage of cancer, and the talk is like a gist is, okay, I can't get back to what I was doing. I was doing 60 laps in the pool last year. So I'm going to go back to the pool only when I can start doing 60 laps. It's like, okay, it's almost like this, it's almost like just visualize, like, what if we just do less? What if you just do 10? What if we just do something, and that's working towards it, like trying to help people understand that there's a new me at the end of this day, and it's a different me, and it also relates to obviously like the family and the support around, like it's a different person. And I would also say on a personal note, my son is 6.5 years old, and he has achondroplasia, which is dwarfism. It's the most common form of dwarfism. And we went through the process of like during the end of pregnancy and complications around the pregnancy and all that unknown, and just like living the medical world like on steroids. I really came to appreciate, having that extra hand, having the person who has a connection. Until today, I have friends who reach out all the time, not just physios, but like from everywhere. It could be in the community, who are just asking because they know I have a lot of connections, and I'm not afraid to use them. Like obviously, to a point, there's only so many times you can contact like the pediatric neurologist who's a friend and ask him for a favor. But like that, I know what it's like to be on the receiving end, and it really really shaped me as a therapist to, like, if I can, to just go the extra mile, to give that extra time for the patient to express themselves, to like, yes, sometimes therapy sessions could be like, okay, let's just go through all the different options. You're going to finish here, and these are the people you should see. This is why you should see them. Like answer those questions. People come to me like, I don't know. What do I do? What do I do next? And I feel like it's a privilege to be in that place, to be able to help, and help like be the metavech, the if I can.
Wow, it sounds like that patience is kind of part of your personality. It's probably what makes you such a good physical therapist, and I'm guessing probably also a good parent. But that will be a story for another time. I imagine you also use that patience when you're explaining financial concepts to people who have no clue about anything. Is that a fair assumption?
It is, and also to try to not be judgmental. It's
Mm-hmm.
very easy to like, see where a person is at and like assume things. Like they're here because their parents are like this. They're here because their upbringing was like that. They expect things that aren't unreasonable. And so yes, to really like practice patience, like okay, taking a step back, letting them express themselves, understanding, trying to understand the core, the root. What am I missing? What can I explain that will make it different? What examples can I bring to, relate to their world? That is something that I've really taken from my world as a therapist. Like always, like it's important to ask the person what it is that they do. Well, then I can kind of like bring examples from the day-to-day life. So I really try to bring that also into to finances, to kind of like be where they're at, not obviously not walk in their footsteps, but like kind of like guide them through it. Sometimes maybe I invest also a lot of time, but I feel like if I can do something good, then why not? Or that extra mile.
Absolutely. You talked about as a physical therapist that it may be less than 40 hours a week, that you could work less than 40 hours a week. Without knowing anything about how you operate, can you tell us how you manage to balance both of these careers that you're working on right now? How many hours a week do you work as a physical therapist? How many hours in financial planning? How does that look?
Okay, well, that's a great question because I don't have necessarily a straight up answer at the moment. Uh, when I started working as a financial planner, then I was working almost full time in a hospital setting in Americas with a lot
Yeah,
of
that makes sense.
driving. Yes. And I felt that it was almost impossible to combine the two, meaning I needed that time. I also needed that headspace to like just be able to like decompress also at the end of the day, just take a break and not necessarily work into the late hours of the night or the wee hours of the morning. So like took back some of my work as a physio, meaning I changed settings, I moved to a closer job. That's also something I didn't mention before, but I mentioned about physio, it's a very flexible job.
That
Not necessarily flexible in the sense like you can, do whatever you want because I guess you're still like constrained to what physios do. But
we
you
are
can work in
adults
various
after all. You
settings,
can never really do what you want.
right? And but like you can work in different settings. You can do the same work in different cities. Sometimes moving to a different place will up your salary by a lot, and even doing the same thing just for like a different coupa, so to speak. So I moved closer to home, and so I reduced the amount of hours that I've been working, hands-on with patients, and that enabled me to start taking on more work in the finances depending on what I do. So there's obviously a lot of face-to-face time, but there's a lot of what goes on behind the scenes. If it is going over clients' reports, going over their finances, preparing between meetings. So I spend at the moment a lot of time on that and trying to use different programs to make that work more efficient. But it was a big part of what like even pushed me towards getting or gaining these extra skills or this extra career was to give me this flexibility. Meaning like it was okay. I love being a physio, maybe even not Navis Slim, but like I want to have another option that isn't just dependent on me just putting in more hours. So with finances, it gave me an opening. I don't necessarily have to have all of my time with clients face to face. I feel that my meetings, I would have, let's say, 5 or 6 meetings per client, and the meetings could be anywhere between an hour to two, but I'm available for them on WhatsApp. We have sometimes very quick calls if there's anything that's like urgent or immediate, help with a bank or a loan. And so to give you like an exact time, as a physio, I do about, I would say, close to 30 hours a week today. And as a financial planner, it would probably be maybe closer to like 20,
Okay.
maybe. In that's why I said it would be a complicated answer, complicated question because over time, the financial planner will pay more because my hourly rate is higher, or at least I am being paid for the value that I provide and not just the amount of time I'm sitting with someone. And you would increase your fees over time. So I'm a kind of between stage where I'm just growing the business and I get a lot of clients word of mouth. I've never paid for advertising, and I know that that just brings in a lot of clients. Not necessarily everyone's going to close. That's a whole other challenge. But like at the moment, I am more or less at like the max, meaning
Right.
there's only, I can't, probably can't take on more discovery calls or more managing more clients like at the same time. Also, we
Right.
had this war right now. I was in Miluim, and that kind of created a backlog. So I had a lot of clients that needed to, finish a process, and then it's kind of like a dispenser, right? You want to bring in more people, but you have to finish what you've kind of built up. So at the moment, I'm under a lot of pressure, just trying to like juggle everything, finish processes I had started before. I got paid for processes months
Right.
ago, and it just kind of got halted. And so I need to finish that and give them the best service possible at the same time, bring in more clients. So I'm right now juggling a lot.
Well, first of all, then I'll just say again, I know I've said it before and I say it to all my guests, but thank you for taking the time to have this conversation when you're so, so busy. You
Pleasure.
just said something really interesting that when you're working in finance, you get paid based on the value, but in physical therapy, you get paid based on the time. And I think that physical therapy also has the value, but because you're getting paid by a hospital or a health clinic, it doesn't feel that way. Possibly if physical therapists who go out on their own may be making the hourly rate or something more similar to what they might want. I don't know. But I think the real
I,
difference in what you just said is that you get to make your own rate. When you do something entrepreneurial, you get to set your own salary. When you have a stable salary, when you have a job with a regular monthly salary or an hourly rate, someone else is deciding it for you, which many people think
mhm.
is nice and many people think is limiting. Sounds like you are kind of straddling those two worlds right now.
Right. I did work, I'll say, I did work in private practice as well, meaning when I was working in different public settings, I was also working privately and doing house calls. And even if then you want to say you're basing your rate on the value that you give, it's still capped at some point. Because us as parents can think, okay, my daughter has a difficulty with speech or needs to see an OT, and that therapist will say, okay, I charge 400 shekels an hour, 450, 500. And you're like, wait, I need to do this
And
every
the
single
parents
week
like, and I need 10 sessions.
at 10 sessions at least. And it's like, obviously they're providing a huge value, but like as a parent, you feel like there's only so much, or maybe even just anticipation. Like a lot of patients are elderly patients who need, maintenance.
Right.
And it's, I joke with, say, Adnav Slim, and it could be a very heavy, like a heavy financial burden. So I wouldn't say that physical therapist private is capped, but it is more or less. Let's say I would say 500 shekels for therapy is like considered the higher end. Um, I mean, there's some people who just specialize in a certain niche, like vestibular physical therapy, for people with dizziness. I know a guy in Ranana who will charge like 1,400 shekels for a first session.
Wow.
I I called him when I had a vertigo attack, and when I heard the price, I was like, okay, the vertigo kind of like just disappeared. It
And if
doesn't
you didn't have
pay.
vertigo before, you have it now just from listening to that.
So,
Wow.
so like you're obviously providing value and can charge accordingly, but then it's like, okay, you have to fill your whole like docket with patients and constantly run after them. And now if you want to make a lot of money and you can make good money, you're like just you have to always fill up so many patients
Yeah.
to get like to fill a 40-hour week. You would have to do a
Well,
lot of work because just think about the private.
that's the same for any entrepreneur, I would argue.
Yes,
And I've interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs in all different types of industries. It is a challenge all the time. Whether you're a
like the same
lawyer
as
that
well.
has a practice or art teacher or, who does workshops. It could be anything. Or an event planner. No matter what it is, you're constantly chasing after the next client,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll be like that in financial planning too at some point. But let's talk for a few seconds about what services you provide as a financial planner, and what are the biggest challenges you see in your clients, if there are like pervasive problems.
I guess I would first say that I get a lot of people who reach out to me, and not necessarily everyone's relevant. And I find myself being asked if I am a insurance agent or if I am, I give stock picks, which is an investment advisor. I get questions that pertain to accountants. Like as people, when we look for services, we kind of like always look for the one size fits all, or at least the one person who could kind of make all my troubles disappear. So I'm very clear, tell people I'm not an accountant, not US or Israeli accountant for that matter. I don't do pensions. What I do is I try to help families or individuals kind of make sense of their finances, where they're at the moment, what's going to be their situation if they continue, down that path, or if they continue just doing nothing, which in essence is doing something, and then like taking where they're at and showing them where they can be and trying to help them kind of like work their way there. So I guess finance is obviously a spectrum. You can have people who are in the minus or on the like verge of bankruptcy, all the way to people who are like, very, very wealthy who just need wealth management. So if it's a continuum, I'm less towards the wealth management, more towards people needing help with their budgeting, understanding what their cash flow is, improving their cash flow, and like starting to guide them towards taking action to actually improving their situation. So in essence, it's kind of like similar, from the world of healthcare, kind of similar to like a family doctor who you'd come to him and like just spread all your
Yeah.
paperwork, all the diagnosis and stuff. So I'll go over the pensions, I'll go over people's paychecks, we'll go through like different financial challenges or the things that they experience and kind of like simplify it, explain what it's like in Israel. I give you just an example. I got a call one day from a potential client who they're making aliyah from England, and we're talking about like the system and such. It was just a discovery call, but it took me a while to realize that they wanted me to help them. They wanted like stability and assurance and security. They wanted me to open for them a pension fund like over the phone. It's like you don't even have a Teudat Zehut yet. Like just understanding the cultural difference of like, how the pension is in England versus how it is in Israel. It's like, okay, you'll be fine. You'll make aliyah. You'll sit down. You're like, eventually you're going to get a specific profession that they're going to get to a good place where, usually those things are kind of like taken care of, but there are stages along the way. So it'll be like seeing a client where they're at, helping them make sense of where they're at and the different aspects like that have to do with their personal finances. What is it that they are invested in today, right? Because you have your pension, which is mandatory, and in a lot of places in the world, not necessarily. You have a keren ishtalmut, which what is this thing? You have little financial, you know, places you can put like different financial vehicles where to put your money, how to start saving, how to work the banks, what are like, asking for like a fee-free account for like non-Israelis. It seems like just baffling. Like, why would a bank waive their fees? And it's
Because
just
in
like the
no other
small,
country do banks charge fees. Only in Israel. You have to pay to use your own money. But that's a totally separate issue
exactly.
for another time.
It's part of it. Like that the system is really Israelis call it shitat matzliach, meaning they just get away with it until you realize that you
Push
don't
back.
have to, you don't have to, you don't have, right, you can push back. And so like I'll work with clients along that way if it's somebody who's chronically in the minus and push towards like not being in the minus anymore, that mindset as well, like trying to work on that mindset of like understanding that 1 + 1 = 2. You can't spend more than you make. And it's like this novel idea. Maybe because kind of like everyone around us is living in either chronic minuses or there's just this culture of like, and this is always Magiali, like I can go on vacation. Why shouldn't I get the latest phone? Why shouldn't I take this vacation now? And
It's
that like
very
kind
hard.
of those right those thought processes really drive people. So I can say what's like very challenging is that when you comb through people's finances, you see that sometimes their cash flow wasn't terrible. Maybe they were just breaking even, which isn't a good situation, but it isn't like terrible. But then comes the one event. You know, it's either it could be for better and for worse. It could be that vacation that they took, not necessarily even splurging, but then they put on more tashlumim. You know, they're breaking up that plane ticket. Or sadly, I discovered again. Thank God, most of my family is now in Israel. Like my distant relatives are in England, in the States, in Canada. But discovered with Olim when I work with their finances that God forbid, you know, there could be someone in the family who's sick abroad and they're just breaking even, but now they have to buy a plane ticket and fly. And that event, that single event can really set them off course. And it's working and kind of like changing my outlook as you know, you say as that that's best that someone will have an emergency fund. It's like, wait, if you're an Oleh Chadash and you have parents in, you know, the States or anywhere, it's like maybe have also that emergency fund towards a flight, like separate. Like this is something you should keep, you know, God forbid, or maybe there's a simcha. But if you're just breaking even, you can't even afford to take that vacation. So one of the big challenges, and it's not just with Olim, is just seeing that full picture, really gathering that information. And so when I work with clients and I tell them, give them a checklist, you know, take out your bank account statements, go to your credit cards. It could be just explaining, okay, what credit card do they have? Where will they find that information? Getting all that information, combing through that information. So it's a very tedious effort. It takes a lot of time. I found that, you know, going back to your question before, like how much time can I spend on a client? In the beginning, I was spending a lot of time because I also kind of wanted to just get it perfect. But it's very hard to get things perfect. We have transfers that we make via BIT or Paybox or through our bank account, or we just sent money to, you know, our landlord and it isn't showing up. Like it's really like getting down to those details because when you want to make a budget, or we strive for, we call zero budget, meaning no shekel dollar is kind of like going amiss. Everything is, you know, given. So that's a big challenge. And then kind of like bring it to sitting down with client, like really spreading everything out. We have your pensions. This is what's going to be if you, more or less, right? If you continue down this path. Or another challenge is what I mentioned before, the mindset. Meaning a client can come and say, I can just pull my Keren Hishtalmut to pay for like a simcha or to even get out of debt. It's like, okay, you're going to do it. But that Keren Hishtalmut won't exist. You won't have like that. Those are your savings that you've just spent on something that could be a worthy cause. But what is your life like the day after? Meaning you're still living the same way with the same spending habits, either spending even more than you're making, and your situation could be even worse. So it's a kind of like working along a process, trying to help them understand these situations, these challenges, why. And I guess similar to physio, you're not always successful, right? Sometimes like you finish a process and you haven't really accomplished that goal. I'm saying it's just a challenge of any person who provides a service or, you know, we do a work for someone else. You're not always, you know, you don't always get to that end point. Also volunteer with Pamonim, so working with people who have financial difficulties. And so I do this process, I say pro bono. And there too, you can really encounter people who are coming for help, but not necessarily able to go through like all the steps to make it happen. And if I was to relate back to physio for a second, then it's understanding that we're just facilitating a process. Meaning maybe today that, you know, that mind shift hasn't happened, but maybe 5 years from today, maybe 10 years from now, it will click. But it'll click because there were like people along the way.
Wow. Wow, that's very heavy in a lot of ways. I'm not even sure where to go from there because there's just finances are so emotionally fraught. I'm just
Hmm.
really curious if you go through this process with people and they just push back, like they're not able to say could give up something to make the changes that are necessary. I'm just curious if that happens. It must. I can't imagine it doesn't. But is that something you encounter a lot?
So I definitely encounter it. I would say I encounter in different aspects, meaning it could be someone's finances, and then it's a very specific subject. It could be Shabbos spending, right? They love to
That's a
host,
big
and
issue.
hosting is like that is their essence, their being. And then it's like, okay, in the beginning, I felt that like I had a few, even like pro bono clients who I wouldn't say struck a nerve because it wasn't intentional or anything, but like when I try to broach a certain subject, then it wasn't taken in the best way. And then it's just kind of like losing I kind of lost the client on the other end, and meaning that it was like, okay, I touched on something that was just their core. Now, today I try to approach it in different ways, sometimes even like more like humor, or give examples of like, even examples that didn't really happen, but just to like, okay, kind of break the ice. Like saying like it's okay. It's okay to feel that this is your core. This is what makes you. But you can't have every single thing be the one thing that makes you. Like you want to do Shabbos? Do Shabbos. You can't do Walt all
A
week long.
Walt.
Obviously, I mean, if you're in a financial position that you can just afford to do everything, then, I mean, you could choose maybe to, allocate your assets in a different way. But if you decide what your core values are, let's see if you're actually, let's say, spending according to what you believe in. So I actually learned that from another financial planner. That was something that we didn't really touch on where I went to, where I learned. And she was always saying how like there's like this internal compass, and you try to work with clients to understand what is their internal compass, what is really got like, what guides them, and like really drawing it out on a piece of paper. Like, okay, this is what's like you value it most, but like look where you're actually spending your money. And it's like, okay, can we think? Sometimes you're coming up with creative ideas. Okay, you value like your relationship, your spouse with your kids. It doesn't have to, let's say, be the most extravagant, vacation or going to the fanciest hotels or restaurants. Maybe it can be Friday just walking in the park. Like, I'm
I
not going
love
to tell
that.
them how to live their life, but just to kind of like open like their minds, like it doesn't have to involve this. And like saying, what is the price you're paying? The price you're paying is, okay, your family is very important for you. Is investing for your kids' future also important? Like, is that part of those core values? Would you like to get there? Ah, okay, so you want to put aside money every single month for your kids. Where's that coming from? Like, you kind of have to find the balance. And so yeah, so we try to work on that and like kind of like really bring home the ideas of values, of um, goals, like long-term goals, which I think that for many people or at any stage in life where they're having a very hard time kind of getting out of that rut,
Yeah.
meaning they're someone who's living in the minus has a very hard time even thinking about like planning their kids' weddings.
Right.
Like they're in survival mode, but you have to kind of like give that, the why. Why are we saving? Why are we investing? It's not just so that we feel less stress at the end of the month. It's like, okay, also, what happens in the future. Obviously, everyone depends on where, like, your personal situation.
Well, I can say that career coaching is based on a lot of the same principles because it's also about, what is your essence? What are your values? How do I translate those into my career? And also, what are the financial goals I need to hit? How can I marry those two things? And it's extremely emotional. It's a very intricate process, I would say. So I have a lot of respect for you and the work you're doing, and I also really work with people to try to understand what are the ramifications of I'm going to take a job that has low pay. What are the ramifications of a job that has higher pay, and the trade-offs, whether it's the hours of working or the travel or whatever it is. They're not simple solutions. They're not simple answers, I should say. It does take a lot of work. You have given us so much to think about. I really appreciate your time. I will drop your contact information in the show notes for anyone listening to this, whether you're employed and you want to make your money work better for you, or you're unemployed, which I hope nobody is, but unfortunately some people are, to help, get everything in order so that you don't lose sleep at night. Thank you so much for the work that you do, both on the physical side and on the financial side, two extremely important industries. And I think it's really, I don't know what the word is, but maybe like an honor that you're able to do both of those things. I hope that everyone can find two passions and two skills that they love so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind words. And yes, wishing everyone good luck with whatever path, whatever stage of the path they're on, and just be successful.